So tell us a little bit about the journey of this Yeti story, that the blank screen that you started with.
The blank canvas.
Yes.
Yeah, so a lot of times when you are developing projects, they'll have you come in and they'll pitch you a development slate, the studios will. And so the one idea that really appealed to me was just a Yeti movie, and this was before the other Yeti movies, I will add. And it was just a blank slate, it was a blank canvas, there was no story involved. And so I drove home that night and my brain was just kind of spinning with ideas. There was a couple things that really jumped out to me. I ran home and I kind of Googled Yeti, and what came up was really interesting because there's not much lore about them. They're fabled to live on Mount Everest. They're fabled to be kind of ferocious. Everyone's seen their footprints in the snow, but there was really nothing. So I thought, well, this is a great opportunity to come up with the Yeti lore that might be the lore that kids live with for the rest of their lives, you know? And the other thing that was really appealing to me, two other things quick, was just that I wanted a really strong female lead. That was important to me. And I wanted a role model that was more of a tomboy. And I grew up in Ventura, not too far from here, surfing, the skateboarding, camping, and I threw on whatever was laying on my floor pretty much. And I just really was not into kind of the princess movies because I just felt like there was no role model for me. And so that was really important to me. And then, of course, I've grown up and I have still now giant dogs. And that was actually a huge inspiration for just the beginning part of Everest to kind of
Hmm.
have him walk on fours instead of the expected two legs, and to make him playful and to have that nonverbal communication that we have with our pets. So all those things were kind of the early beginnings of the idea.
So how did you guys work as producers to create this workflow and also to create this sense of cultural uh, tapestry, I guess, is what I'm looking for. Does that make sense?
Well, I think we were collaborators first and foremost.
Right.
So, we couldn't make this endeavor at all without talking to each other every single day. And I was at DreamWorks, of course, and Peilin was working with Pearl. And so it's nice to hear that it felt very organic. I think we were, it was hard. It was hard because we wanted to do it right. And so we leaned on our friends at Pearl, and I leaned on Palin to really keep us on track as far as being authentic and doing things the right way. And I think the surprise was is that in the end the story was so universal. When we were worried that maybe it would seem, do they seem like they're, like, I don't know, American kids, do they seem like they're Chinese kids? And we shared so much in common. And that's the beautiful part of this story, is that, yes, we do have things in common. We have very specific cultural differences, but we can find the things in common and hopefully end up with a gorgeous movie and a beautiful story.
I think one of the things that helped is that this film was really born inside both studios. It wasn't at one place and then, we all know many co-productions where it's perhaps developed by an American company and then a Chinese financier comes in and then suddenly the characters have to go to China for a random reason, or, this film from the beginning, from inception, Jill had this idea of taking the Yeti home to the Himalayas. China was a natural geographical place that they would live and come from. And so I think that it was very organic from the beginning. And one of the core beliefs that we have at Pearl is that stories can be very culturally specific and authentic, but at the same time be globally relatable because of what they're about thematically. And I think Jill has woven such beautiful themes into this film that it doesn't matter if you're a grandmother in Russia or a little boy in Brazil. You definitely don't have to be Chinese. That it all speaks to you.
So, Chloe, what appealed to you about the role, and how did you approach being ready to do that in what I assume was a room with a microphone?
Yeah, it's crazy how just when I went in to meet with everyone for the role originally, I left and called my agents and I was like, if I don't get that, I should just quit acting because this character, I don't know anyone who, this was me. It just felt like me. It felt like I lived in Shanghai with my grandma when I was 15 years old, and I grew up with six brothers. I was a huge tomboy. I wore all their hand-me-downs. I was always odd jobs and always just like a self-proclaimed loner. That's exactly who I was and who I still feel on the inside, despite this ill-equipped outfit for this panel. Having a really hard time. He's like taking pictures. I'm like, if you see me on my mic. Anyway, it was really like it was me and Jill in the room. I started this 3 years ago, and so the reference of even just knowing what was in, if I was leaning down to talk to something, or if it was 10 feet away, there's nothing. So as an actor, you are completely stripped of anything that kind of, you're not in hair and makeup, you're not in a wardrobe, there's nothing, and that was interesting. But I was really lucky in the fact that the core of who the character was and the spirit of her was so just it felt so similar to who I was that it didn't feel. I was lucky to be able to lean on that instead of anything else, because everything else kind of fell into place after that. And I grew up and I had I was a tomboy who is half Chinese and was culturally raised. People are like, you don't look Chinese. Even Chinese people are like, you're not Chinese all the time. My grandma says I don't look Chinese ever, and she's Chinese and she knows that I am. But I was raised much more culturally Chinese than what people kind of expect when they look at me. And that's part of being culturally different that people don't think about. They think about the aesthetic part, they think about other things, but they don't think about the nuance of the way that you don't turn your back and talk like that in an argument with the Chinese parent if you want to, survive. There's a lot of different things that I was raised, even just like at the dinner table, making you're going to feed your elders first, the way that they do at the end of the movie. There's like all these little nuances that I felt so seen by when I saw the film, and that were so effortless to me, and so like I would get like jittery about how exciting it was to not have to, to think about little kids bringing bao to school, like the pork buns, and not getting made fun of the way that I did, because it's such an authentic thing, but it also was so effortlessly just kind of in the film, yet the story was so universal. So that part is really exciting, to think that maybe now someone could bring bao to school and it won't be they won't make fun of you. It's
have
cool.
to share.
Yes.
What's the thing that you were most concerned, or that you worked the hardest on, and that you felt that you somehow conquered in your work?
For me, this is the first time ever a modern-day Chinese family has been featured in a global animated film. And yeah, you can clap for that. It was so profound, that notion. Actually, I'm still kind of in disbelief that this weekend the #1 box office film features a modern-day Chinese family. It's hard not to feel so emotional about that. Growing up, never seeing someone that looked like myself in film and television, it's kind of been a life mission that I really believe in. And we of course hope this film is really successful in China and plays well in China. But I think my personal connection is more with Asian Americans, having grown up here in this country and that experience. And one of the most gratifying thing for me about screenings I've gone to is the Asian women in particular that have come up to me and said, this movie means everything to me. This movie is, I've never felt seen in this way. For my children to see what's on the screen, to see your role in this film, the phrase I keep hearing is that if you don't see it, you can't be it. And how deeply meaningful that is to the community. And so the pressure of, okay, this is the first time, and wanting to do it right in a way that was going to feel true and authentic and resonate with that audience was so important to me. And the fact that people seem to be connecting with it and responding to it is probably the most meaningful thing of all.
It's hard, unless you're an Asian American, to really understand the duality of what being Asian American means and what being Asian means. Because when you're Asian American, you are a minority. And obviously when you're from Asia, you're not. And so to hit it on the head, like to be able to make something that is such a universal film that works both here and China, that's a really hard thing to actually get done, because culturally Asian Americans and or Chinese Americans, at least in my opinion, and Chinese people who live in China, it's a very, very different thing. There's a lot of similarities, but there's a lot of things that you don't, when you're growing up and you don't have representation, you really think that you can't do the things that, because you are not white enough, you are not this enough, you are not that enough, and they don't have that as much there, obviously. So that's been something to have people come up and speak about that in particular has been really, really powerful. And it's, film is so impactful. Obviously, everyone in this room knows that. But animation is really the first time people see film. It's your first. It's the entryway. It's the gateway drug, and so to have this be so impactful for young kids, that's been really cool, especially for both.
Definitely.
Thank you all for being here today.